Welcome to the show, Jesse. How's it going?
Great to chat with you.
I've been following some of the stuff you've been posting around cold emailing, and a lot of it caught my attention, and I agree with it because I've kind of been there, done that, right? I was just hoping to talk to you today and just unravel the mystery of some about cold emailing. Give me like a minute or two about yourself, like how you sort of got to the stage.
Yeah, actually, so I was an enterprise software rep, then strategy leader. I ran a frontline team also. And what happened was I was sending a lot of cold emails, my team was. And, there was a point where it was kind of an email signature where basically I had to make a decision. Do I want to keep going and kind of play the game of, keeping the email signature on and I said no, and they let me go. So I ended up starting my own company, my own SaaS company. Now I'm profitable. And we've pretty much scaled up our entire business just with cold email. So we've been able to get really, efficient and effective with the campaigns. I think cold email is a really great way to get to prospects. And I think deliverability is actually the hardest part of it now. And that's where this real science comes in.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot's changed over the couple of years, and we'll get to some of the technical stuff in a minute. But just getting past that junk mail filter is getting harder and harder. Like they're getting more and more sophisticated as time progresses. Have you seen that sort of change?
I've ran about close to 300 tests in the Pavilion, Revenue Collective, and other communities, even on Dark Social, some of the other groups that are out there. And what I found is most organizations, probably about 75% of them, have something wrong with the way that they're emailing right now, meaning basic settings that take 5 minutes to fix, right? We're not talking about anything that's a real IT project. We're talking, oh, we didn't have that on, right? And it's scary because you have volume-based SDRs that are sending what they call sequences, and most of those sequences are actually landing in the spam folder. So we're seeing just a tremendous amount of success with our campaigns, but because we're really, definitively guaranteeing we're getting in the inbox at the highest percentages. So, that's kind of where we're specialized.
And do you think like that's where some of this cold email outreach gets a bad rap because it's ineffective because they're making like these mistakes, as opposed to it's ineffective because for some other reason?
It's actually funny. So a lot of the kind of experts out there, the gurus, if you will, what they will tell you a lot is that cold email doesn't work. It doesn't do this or whatever, but it actually works really well. And the reason that a lot of them don't like it is because they're in the spam folder. When you land in the primary inbox, you get really high responses, right? Now here's the next step, right? You do have to make those campaigns valuable. You have to think through that. You have to kind of like make that copy. But what I try to see is I see all these teams, they're not getting responses. Most teams I talk to, they pull up their dashboard and they're under a 1% response rate. And that's even like a lot of the times those metrics are even mixed in with other inbound opportunities. And that is a whole really weird way to kind of go about your job if you're kind of wasting a lot of time, and you're probably not pissing off your customers like a lot of the gurus will tell you, but you're actually just causing a lot of your emails to go into spam. So you're really accomplishing almost zero, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So like, would you call this email marketing? Because like, obviously, when someone says, oh, what is email marketing? The term's been around for a while. It used to be, using email to send newsletters or communication. Generally, most people associate newsletters with it, right? And mostly the outbound stuff is very SDR, very sales sort of focused. It's like that outbound side. But then we've got, the HubSpot who is sort of brainwashed generation to thinking that everything should be inbound, it shouldn't do any outbound. What's your thoughts on like this transition from the old to the new?
I think what's going to eventually happen is, and you're starting to see this, there's a great article out from OpenView on PLG outbound, right? Okay. What's going to happen is the people who can figure out how to do outbound more programmatically, they don't have to be as aggressive on their call to action. So you can actually take, think about it, if your customers are using your product, you can actually kind of get them into the funnel a little bit better, and you can figure out which ones you need to call and not annoy them, right? Because you know which ones are kind of maybe rage clicking or they need help or whatever. But what I think is going to happen is a lot of the outbound is going to start to become inbound. if you build systems, right? Meaning you build people that are going to be focused on setting up the right inbound model. So what we do is we have ours down now. I'm not going to go reorg every SaaS company out there, but we have a master inbox. That master inbox takes all of the responses. Now we can sell our product to 1 to 100,000. There's hundreds of thousands of businesses out there, right? So you have to temper this with, how many companies can you sell to? And, there's different go-to-market motions for different models. But for ours, where we could sell a, $500 a month product to as many small businesses that could take it, I can get to any one of those companies through cold email. And all I need to do is insert more inboxes if I'm going to be scaling across the, to keep out of the spam folder, more domain names, more providers, and that will keep my domain healthy. And the great thing is we don't send emails that get bad responses. Sometimes people say they're not interested. That's what sales is, right? You're going to have that happen, but it's not like we're getting a bunch of these, like, I'm going to call your manager, or, like a lot of them will make you believe, right? You hear people like they're just up in complete arms on the internet trying to argue people, right? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we don't see happening. We see people thanking us a lot of the times just because they like the content that we send them.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. Is kind of like it's just like a direct response mechanism, like anything else. But like, what is, like, if you're doing a really bad campaign, what is a general sort of response rate or metrics versus something
Yep.
that is more maybe on the lower end of one of your successful campaigns as a benchmark to compare against?
Yeah. So John, you're right at my heartstrings right here, because when I start talking to people, I really like to get into the numbers. So here's kind of some really reasonable numbers to expect. What we see most SaaS companies, the okay ones, the ones that have they've probably got their delivery settings right. They've probably got some mail flow, 40% open rate, probably a 2 to 3% response rate or under. But you have to look at the number of emails they're sending too, because I see people show me their campaigns and I'm like, well, how many emails did you send? And then they're like 300. I'm like, well, okay, try doing that across a good amount of them, right? Because 300 emails isn't going to produce the output you need, right? That might be one, whatever. But a good metric would be if you send out where we do it, since we've nailed down delivery, we're seeing between a 60 and an 80% open rate.
Wow.
And what we do is, the way that we do it is we don't run any campaigns under 50% open, but it's not the open rate that matters. It's open rate is a product of the delivery. So how well you've set that up, how well you validated the data, how well you've got the right emails, how well the message goes over in the subject line. And then that's the open rate. But then we expect a 5% response rate off of that open rate. If we see either one of those dip, we know there's something wrong. Now, you have to remember, some people will say, well, we're getting a higher one, but I'm like, yeah, but go try to do that over thousands, hundreds of thousands of emails. You're not going to be able, the sustainability is hard, right? Like, that's the challenge that people have. Yeah, you can do it at that scale, but when you go up, it's just like engineers when they're thinking about running cloud computing and multi-threaded, distributed computing applications, Kubernetes and cloud, they're thinking that way. Why aren't salespeople thinking that way? Why do we think as salespeople we can't just like scale? There's scale up, scale down. The way that you do it, and you have to know the cost and the inputs. And I think this is one area where a lot of sales leaders fall down right now. A lot of the traditional sales leaders, loudest ones in the room, are kind of still yelling around, but their volume stuff that they're doing is putting them right in the spam filters, and then they're replacing people all over the place. It's really dangerous behavior. I hope it stops. Personally, I really feel bad for the SDRs or the salespeople that are kind of involved in those types of organizations.
Yeah, because I mean, it sort of reminds me of that really bad syndicated content providers who, spam out one of your ebooks or some kind of like email to their list, and you just know that the quality is really bad. So I think it sort of gets sometimes lumped in that side of the industry. But look, just one quick story. So I was doing some work for a startup a couple of years ago, and they were they had one SDR, right? A sort of new salesperson. I was doing some more growth work on some other things. And anyway, I was doing like a bit of an SEO audit on the domain integrity, right? Because I'm like, you're trying to figure out like, why isn't this domain sort of like really popping? It's been like a year or two, had a bit of age on it. And I'm like, we should be sort of seeing some ramp up here of the SEO side of things. Anyway, so I went through my whole sort of audit checklist, and like a lot of that was the domain. So I looked at like, SPF records and like the blacklist report, and I was like, oh crap, we're in a blacklist. And of course, the engineers are sort of over there doing the product thing, and they're not sort of looking at this because it's the front end
Right.
side of everything, right? So it's not their responsibility. And, they hate dealing with websites, anything front end, consumer facing. Like, no, we're too good for that, right? And rightly so, it's not their job. But because they didn't have a product person or anyone else tracking this, there was no system to like check if the domain was on a blacklist. So then I saw what it was, and I was like, oh, why are we on a blacklist? Like, if only, we only got like one salesperson. Anyway, this salesperson had been sending from his personal Gmail folder all these outbound emails, like hundreds a day, one by one, cut and paste kind of job. And I find that out, and I was like, oh crap. So we
Gotta
sort of had to
slow
fix
down.
that. Yeah. So like, I just found like people aren't really aware of this. Do you find that pretty often with
Oh
your
yeah. So like I said, I went into the so I'm an active contributor to the Revenue Collective, now known as the Pavilion. I've helped out a lot of people in there. I've gotten on, I wanted to validate the problem before I really went into the business. But when I've checked now almost 250 servers, and I would say out of those, at very few of them, 9 out of 10 probably, or was like 1 out of 10 have it completely correct. Right. Now, there's still work to do after that. You still have to keep your list hygiene. You have to make sure you're validating them. However, it starts with, you better set up there's settings that you have to set up, that your founders have to set up, or your CEO or whoever is setting up your company. When you set up Google, you have to set these settings on. Now, what we do see is a trend where if it's a little bit older, if they're like in maybe a C round, D round company, a lot of the times they'll have a little bit more rigor there because they're trying to like fix the spam. But I'm still telling you, like, even CD round companies that missed their, like, I can name the names of the companies, like I've done the audits already. And I go in, and when I look at the records, I'm like, those records are going to prevent you from delivering cold. And the weird thing about this is the only people who are impacted by this really badly are people who have to send to new domains. So we're talking when you want to make new friends on email internet, you're going to need to basically go in there, and you're going to need to be able to break through the spam filter. And if you can't, you have to be pretty much perfection now because of the way that all of the security flaws happen through email.
So just summarizing, new domains means like someone who hasn't emailed you before, so there's no relationship. That's like what you'd call a new person, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is, a lot of the times the spam problem doesn't really show up. The only place it shows up in your company is this one area that you really need to work well right now, right? It's where you need to generate pipeline, and you need to generate new meetings, right? New business opportunities. You need to test the copy, because you're emailing completely net new domains, typically with inboxes that get very low response rates, right? Because remember, a good cold email is 5%. So if you think about some of the people getting 1%, there's no good, like, that's all they're doing. They're sending emails that aren't getting responses. The spam filters see that behavior, and they got them every single time.
You're just saying it's really easy for the spam filter to detect, because it's like,
oh yeah,
pattern of behavior, and there's no other sort of
yeah,
randomness.
It's easy. And then the copy is the same every time usually. So it's like, I mean, this is like machine learning models, or, they're processing predictive models on it, and they're saying, yep, that's probably spam because we've seen this same message 16 times before. And you have to be able, like, the best reps are going to figure out how to do this and bypass the spam filters. And that's what we've done.
There's a bit of a fallacy out there. I just want to hit this on the head. Like, there's all these sort of like lead reveal tools. Like, I won't name them, but there's a lot, like, lead findery sort of tools where, just click this Chrome extension and click on this person's LinkedIn profile, and bang, their email address is there. And then you can just email them, and like sales will just pop out of the atmosphere, and you'll hit your quota. Like, that's the dream that's sold with a lot of these tools, right? But the reality is, I always say like that finding the email is the easiest part. Finding an accurate email, a bit harder. Then getting it into the inbox, that's the hardest thing. You know what I mean? And then your
Yeah.
copy has to take over. So, what's your thoughts on these sort of like lead tools?
Yeah. So so what those tools are doing typically, there's two ways they do it. One way, they have a database and they're taking the data that is on the screen. So they're scraping whatever is on the screen. If they're on LinkedIn, they're scraping the LinkedIn name and the company. Then they go match up against their database. That's one way they do it. Now, that is dangerous because what happens is the other way to do it is the more scientific way, but it's not the way that people want to do it, because when you get the answer, you don't like the answer. So what it is there's this type of email. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and we had a good conversation about it, but the email can come back when you run a test. And what I'm talking about is a validation test. Now, this isn't like a quality test or this is a 0 or 1 or 2. Actually, there's other types of fields that can happen here, but you send out this request and it asks, hey, is this a real email? It's going to come back and tell you valid, catch all, or bounce, there's a couple other ones, but like, let's just, for whatever, those are the ones. Now, everybody can email the valid ones, because that one is there. It's not something that you shouldn't email unless it's like a role based, like sales at whatever, info at whatever. But the ones you got to be careful of, and this is where everybody's getting caught right now, you got to be careful of ones that are called catch-alls. Now, catch-alls are okay. What that's doing is that the server is telling you that when you run the validation, you can use any of the tools in the market. The tool should only be about 0.02 cents per record. So it's very inexpensive. Everybody should do this before they send it out. But those catch-alls, what happens is the server comes back and says, this email, we're not going to tell you if this email's here or anybody else's email's here. So the response is empty. So you don't know if it's a good email. So you have to make the determinist, you have to determine if you're going to email it still. People get frustrated and they want to email it anyways, and they just pull it out of their data provider. And if they pull it out of their data provider and send it, the person doesn't work there, big problem, right? If you have over a certain percent there, you're tagged and you're spamming now. So, just to recap, the only time you want to actually send to catch-alls are when they gave you the email, or you validated it another way and you can trust the source. I mean, you think about some of the tools out there, they will find it on the internet, but they'll give you the source. If they don't give you the source and it's just in one of these bulk data providers, we know the names. If you see it in there and then you email it without validation, you are in trouble. That's going to cause you a very big problem. And this is happening all over the place. What you need to do is, from an ops team perspective, you need to make sure that before your emails are being sent, that there's been a validation on that email before it goes out of your domain, if you want to keep the health of the domain.
Okay, great. So we've kind of talked about maybe like acquiring a list. There's heaps of places, we know the tools out there. I'm sure it's very easy to find them. I was talking to Eden on a podcast just before this, and he's running a bit of a service as well. He speaks highly of your work as well, which is good. So we've got our list, right, of our prospects. We then do this validation as the next step sort of thing to see if they're real email addresses, right? So if you have to step us through the sort of next steps and the sort of like the failure points or major ones, so just in a very simplistic way, what's the next step from there?
Yeah. So what you want to do after that, so what most people can do then is, I guess the step before that is there's a process called email warm-up that you really should be doing. Now, this is one of those ones where a lot of companies aren't doing it because they don't understand it. They are doing it on their marketing team, believe it or not. They just don't know it because the provider does it for them, right? In marketing, that when you do it from there. But what an email warm-up is you're doing so this is something before that validation step, but that warm-up process, you're taking somebody who has like maybe that 1% to 2% response rate, and you're bringing them up to like a 30% response rate. So if they do get a couple of dings on their record on there, it's not going to matter because they've got so much good back into it. What that's doing is it's sending to a bunch of people warm-up network. You're sending it to
you mean like an SDR in this case, like doing a bit of non-salesy emailing through their account? Is that what you're talking about here?
No. So the warm-up process is what you can do with the warm-up process is that allows you to go and send to a bunch of network. You hook it up to your inbox and you warm up through all the other people that are sending cold emails are sending each other like kind of random messages back and forth. So what that does is it takes the metrics up from like an email box that you're using a 1 or 2% response rate to up to a 30% response rate. So now if you do have problems where you're not getting responses or you get clicked report as spam, which you're going to have happen occasionally, you're going to be safe.
Okay.
So that's what warm up is. And that's before the validation step. That's the important part.
And obviously, hopefully we've got our domain sort of issues sorted, right? Like if we're on blacklist or like we've got the domain going for a little while. There's not too many like sort of sub email accounts underneath all attached to the same domain, right? I think I was watching some of your videos and you're like, you can't have too many accounts sending from the same sort of root domain, right?
So what you can do is you can have them sending. The problem is it's a choke point of like, if that domain some reason gets on a list, everything stops.
Yep.
So this is where the next level is. So after that validation stuff that we talked about, the real next level, and this gets a little into the weeds. I know, you're probably going to have to, people will have to review this if I'm kind of, look at some of the more content, but where you can really get an advantage right now, and there's tools out there to help you do this. The 1% most elite cold email people out there, they're doing something called inbox rotation. And what that means is they've now figured out, okay, well, we have to be very cautious of the domain. We have to know all the validation steps. We have a real, look, they're trying to generate business that way. Why do something, why be mediocre, right? So what you do is you can run multiple domains and multiple inboxes. Now, this gets really tricky if you work at a SaaS company with a traditional IT department, because there's like, what are you trying to do here? Now, I've worked with a couple of orgs where they spin up another domain and they spin up 5 more inboxes and they start warming them up and they're having a lot of success. The really good ones, though, are doing not only that, they'll spin up 10 domains, 5 inboxes per domain, and then they go out and then they use validated data and they do it. And there's a culture, there's like a growth group that you see around that are doing this type of stuff. I'm going to be talking about this in my community that I've launched. It's for Lead Magic for B2B lead gen experts. But this type of behavior is actually where you want to go to completely evade the spam filters and get relevant in your customer's inbox, right?
So this is just like sending from multiple, just for explanation, like
Yep.
if company is companyxyz.com, you'd have company XYZ, abc.com.
Yeah. So what you would do is, you would have, let's say you were sending one campaign. It was a campaign that you were sending out to VPs of engineering for a certain product, for whatever. Under that campaign, you'd have 3 or 4 domain names. You'd have go, whatever your company is called, try, whatever your company is called, and maybe you're like another domain that's close to it. They're all top level domains. Hopefully they're over a year old. And hopefully they've been warming up for 2 weeks. Then you tie one inbox, and each inbox shouldn't send more than 50 emails per day. You tie that one inbox to that campaign. You'd have 5 inboxes tied. They'd be on separate domains, and they would all have high deliverability because you'd have all the settings, and they'd all have high quality data. So what that would do is it would send 1 from the first domain inbox, 1 from the second, 1 from the third, 1 from the fourth, and 1 from the fifth. And this secret that I just told everybody, if you didn't know this, this is the best way to generate cold emails. It's tricky to set up, but there's a lot of advantages. And I don't recommend companies go, there's growth. It's a growth strategy, right? You're going to have the right org. A lot of the times it's a startup. It's an earlier stage company that wants to get out of the gates fast, that wants to accelerate their growth and be, this is one of the ways you can really do it. I mean, the secret's out. I'm giving it away right here.
Okay. But let's just say we're small, right? And we're just like, okay, we don't have the technical expertise to like have multiple domains. We've got 1 or maybe 2, right?
Yep.
Maybe the second one's kind of like an LMS or like, customer support domain or whatever. We've got a bit of a blog on. So we've got to get access to 2. Maybe go through the sort of that hygiene of configuring the domain and the email settings properly.
Sure.
Right? And like, what's the sort of limits? You're saying 50 a day, right? So just as a general guide, just to say, the person's not very skilled at direct response marketing or copywriting, but like, they're not too bad. They, got product traction. There's a sort of a market there that they can capture pretty easily. So we're just saying 50 a day per account.
Yeah. So here's why I say, I mean, look, you can definitely go, we're doing like 50 and we're also sending 25 reputation emails a day with one account. The reason that we don't scale up with the number of send that we have under an account, I wouldn't do any more than 100. Like even that's risky. The reason why it's so risky is because if you get one report spam or two in one day, you can shut down the whole domain name. So the setup process, there's steps you have to take. I mean, you have to set up the open tracker. You have to set up the three main DKIM, SPF, and DMARC. DMARC, you want to have some sort of monitoring on it. Those are the main steps. Once you have that up and running, then you're all set to go. You can put 5 inboxes on it. We don't recommend putting more than 5 on a domain that are sending cold email. And we don't recommend sending more than 50 per inbox because it's so inexpensive to spin up another domain and spin up another 5 inboxes, and the risk dramatically goes down. Remember, if somebody clicks report to spam a few times in a day on your inbox, you're in trouble, right? It's not very forgiving. So if like I always tell people, like, well, how well do you know the copy is going to work? Like, have you test? And then that's the problem. When I ask that question, I might not be right there, but until they can give me an answer to that question of what their copy gets for a complaint rate, there's no discussion. They should be hedging their bets, and they should be putting extreme limits on there, especially a team that's measured on meetings and gets paid on it, right? They're going to be sending as most amount as they possibly can out. Like, yeah, it's a funny dynamic that's happening in a lot of these SaaS companies, the way that the compensation models work.
Yeah. Hey, so just broadly though, like we're just talking about channels here, because this comes up with me all the time. Hey John, what sort of channel should we use? Blah blah blah. And there seems to be these camps, right? Like there's the inbound crowd who are like, no, just do sort of SEO and some Facebook ads, and it comes to a landing page, then we harvest the lead, and then, blah blah blah. There's other teams that are like just on the phones, outbound. They might be less tech savvy on the email sort of thing, but they're all complex, high ACV products. Like just the nature of the product is high touch meetings, face-to-face meetings, events, getting some people into a dining room and like schmoozing them a tiny bit. There's that camp, right? And maybe this is the traditional sort of marketing comms camp, which is media advertising sort of driven, right? Where do you think this animosity comes with like these outbound things? Like, is it a cultural as well?
I'll tell you what's happening, right? So what's happening is, traditionally you see a lot of salespeople, they're not very technical. They're not, they've got more of a high, a lot of them are high EQ, right? High emotional intelligence. What's happening now is if you understand your value isn't how much your wealth isn't based on how much money you make. It's based on how much time you have, right? To make more money, right? Like, so what ends up happening is you get into this really big argument with a particular group where if you start talking about email, you'll hear kind of like the fanatical prospecting, the Jeb Blunts or whatever his name is. I think Blunts, whatever. But when you talk with him, you hear about him. He'll kind of say, I don't want to hire a button pusher for 70 grand a year, whatever it is. He makes a comment. But what my goals are when I'm doing technology with sales is I want to limit the amount of time I have to spend doing anything. I don't want to sit there and make, like, if I'm going to make phone calls, I want to make sure that the return is super high. Now, for me, it's just not something I would be doing. I would not be making, like, I'm not saying it's not good for other people. If you don't know how to set up cold email systems like I do, then I probably would recommend, if you want to keep your job, if that's your goal, if that's your end goal, start making phone calls. But the problem with phone calls are you can't detach the time from, you have to sit there. You don't have a robot doing it for you. So, if you want to work above the API, if you want to be above the API sales rep, somebody who's not part of the cog in the wheel, right? Then you're going to probably want to learn how to build systems that can reproduce either through distribution of content or distribution of email or whatever, however it's going to go for your sake to like do that. If you're an entrepreneur and you're doing that, that's what you really have to think about. The flip side is, the people that are there, they can look good in their org if they're making a lot of calls. It makes them feel powerful. I think they get a little bit aggressive sometimes, but sometimes I get into arguments with them, but I also really respect them. And the good ones are actually making calls to the right phone numbers. They have it already sourced and they use power assisted dialers. So like it gets a little better, but I still think it's a little bit of a train wreck right now watching, people get on calls and the response rates are just way too low on those types of things for me to be comfortable running a program like that in my business.
Yeah, so another one of the objections you get is like, oh, okay, maybe it works for like low price products, outbound cold sort of stuff, the hit rate's really low. You might get a couple like $100 sales, whatever. But in your opinion, have you seen this result in some really high sort of revenue metrics as a result of cold email campaigns?
It's just you could be good at anything. I mean, with cold email, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we run, yeah, I mean, I went from zero, $50,000 a month of MRR with literally only one channel. Like, I mean, pretty much my content that I distribute on LinkedIn, which is like 3 to 4 posts a week, and then I do cold email. And we've gotten, from zero, and I knew we could do it. I mean, and by the way, we could have done other channels. I mean, we're just as good at Facebook ads if we wanted to. We're just as good at LinkedIn, but we like to test every strategy and we like to know what works. I mean, we know how to do all of the stuff, right? We've become like our whole goal is to run as effective and efficient, sustainable business model as we possibly can, seeking as much profitability as we can, right? Like that's kind of our goal. And we didn't, we bootstrapped it. So we didn't take any investment on, we didn't need to, because it's one of those things. And, we're moving fast. So it's like, our campaigns run all day. Like we come into meetings like all day long and people buy, and we don't have, we don't have any friction there. Like we run sales and marketing as one. We don't split it up, and it's really easy.
Okay, so but obviously, okay, there's the next part of thing, which is like copywriting skills, right? Direct response copywriting, which is a bit of an art, right? There's a lot of people who haven't done it before. They'll be like, subject line, oh, please buy my thing, and then the first line is like, hello, sir, I have this product and it's awesome, blah, 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 blah. It's like the complete opposite of what you probably should do. So quick crash course, like what are the problems that you see when it comes to the copy and the headline, 80-20 rule, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think where you got to kind of focus is keep it really short, few sentences. That's it. The steps that we have our own framework that we use. What we do is in the beginning, we put a curiosity gap to get them to go through the email. We want to make sure it's not like clickbait, but it's a curiosity gap, right? They got to have that, in there. Then we make sure that there's some sort of reward in there, meaning like a customer story or whatever. We help X do Y. It's relevant to you because whatever, we think we could do the same. The other thing we're using is we're actually incorporating a lot of technographics. We'll say like, we see you're using this technology. That actually helps a lot because it gives relevance. And then we make a simple request that's not a calendar invite. We ask them if they'd be interested in learning more. They know our message is extremely relevant because we've done the research. We've done it at scale. We've incorporated, we're using a lot of webhooks and APIs. So we're able to build these spreadsheets pretty fast. These mail merge spreadsheets are really, it's all an automated process at this point, right? We have it all running through no code, and that's how we run it. And we basically send out as many of these things as we can because we know they're going to convert every time at some of them are even converting at 10% response rate, which is really good. So that's what's, and then we see about a 15 to 20% positive response rate out of those. And then, if you do the math, if you can send 10,000 a month, you think about that number, you're talking about a pretty solid, sustainable business model that you don't really need to do anything else. We do other things, but that's pretty much all you need to do. And you could scale for quite a while.
Look, I've gone through your community, so just a quick shout out if you want to do that to your community, because it just sort of solidified a couple of things to me, and that's where we got this thing from. And I think if people want to delve into a bit more, it's a really good repository to maybe just whet your appetite. And there's some really detailed stuff you go into there. So if they want to learn out more and join this community, what's the address of that one?
Sure. If they want to go to there, it's just community.leadmagic.io. And they can also kind of follow me on LinkedIn, Jesse Ouellette, if they want to follow me there. But look, some of this stuff does get into the weeds. That's the one thing I'd say. But if you could take on a little bit, you're going to get a performance boost every time. And if your goal in life is to get a little bit better every day, you'll be fine. You drink some water, you can get off the phone call, stop arguing with people, and you'll be able to just live and sit on the beach all day, right? So that's all it is.
Hey, so just quickly, tools like we sort of did mention Gmail here. I know some people try and do these like cold email campaigns, buying lists, shoving to MailChimp, sending that out. There's Zoho, there's like so many HubSpot, all these kind of things that you can use. What if you sort of had to run through the big ones? What would you recommend?
I can tell you what I wouldn't do. I would not use a tool that I hate to talk about the actual tool itself.
I know.
I'm running. I'm actually running. I'm building my own, right? But we use no code, so we build a lot of our own stuff. But the stuff that I would say you could definitely get by with right now that would really help you would be check out. And if you want to come to the community, I can talk more about this, but check out Smart Lead Instantly right now. Those are my two picks. If they don't keep up with the roadmap, I'm going to pick something else. I never would recommend it. I wouldn't. 99% of the tools that people are using aren't going to meet the standards for it's going to be I'm running real growth systems here. So it's like, there might be something in the tool that isn't there, but there's another thing in there that's going to give me a 10x leverage point, so I'm going to go hard on that. But the two that I like right now are Smart Lead, and I like for sequencing, I like Smart Lead and I like Instantly. And any of the people that are doing like cold emails, these are the two products that people are using. They've kind of passed through the Lemlists and the reply.ios, and they're now everyone's moved to these two, and we'll see what happens, right? And there might be another one popping up. Who knows, right? So
yeah, well I think Guillaume sold that, so he did pretty well out of it.
I would be very careful about any. I won't, because I actually like a lot of the companies. I would never go after a brand, but I think any company that's charging you based on the number of inboxes right now, and they're charging you, a lot of, that's a risky proposition for you because you need a lot of inboxes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So keep an eye out on that. That's one thing I'd say that is not going to be a sustainable model for your business if you're going to scale through cold email, because we have probably 250 inboxes.
Oof. And paying you like $5-10 a month, that's a lot of cash.
$1 a month.
Oof. Okay, that's good.
Soho. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, nice. I like it. Okay. Yeah. Let's not get sort of caught up in tools, but I think the measurement thing is really important. Just so benchmarking. If something's really wrong. I think tools. Everyone's got a different stack, and that's what I'm saying. Like it's so technical setting up some of these systems, and everyone has different providers for different things. So like some not constrained by some of the decisions that have been made, upstream. But what about the copy side of things? So is there a book you'd recommend people read to sort of get a crash course on this? I know in your community you sort of mentioned this guy who does the deal, the offer thing, but I mean, is there a book that you've read?
Yeah, there's two people to look at. So if you're trying to improve your offer, there's one person to look at. Alex Ramosi, he kind of breaks down the offer stage of like how you need to propose something and whatever. For a lot of software companies, the offer is usually the same. It's how we can help you. Like we've helped XY customers with our technology. So that's offer obviously is not always good. Service businesses have a much higher leverage there. In fact, I've got a couple campaigns I'm helping a service business with, and they just get orders after the email. They don't even have to do a call. So it's like, but that's a service business, right? It's a different model. Then the other one that I would look at, and I've been a huge advocate of his, done consulting projects with them, and it'd be Winning by Design. Anything that they put out there, you can trust. Jocko's they have something called the RRR. I think it's, so go take a look at that one. That's the framework that I think you'd probably want to look at. Anything they have a red book. It's a red book. It's on the Amazon store. It's like Winning by Design. It's just like a really, really good book for that. But take that book and go scale the hell out of that book with a bunch of technologies, and you'll be in a really good spot in your life, and you'll be making a lot of money. You might even be running a lead gen company in the next day.
What's your favorite website resource that maybe people aren't aware of that you'd like to share?
Winningbydesign.com.
Okay.
Or the YouTube channel that they have.
Hey, what a piece of tech that you can't do without every day. It could be hardware or software.
I would say Slack. So we've actually really standardized on all of our alerts. Everything we do goes through Slack. We don't have to go into any tools or anything. Everything comes into Slack.
Okay, great. Okay, I love it.
Or Airtable, the other one.
Yeah. What about a quote or a meme, or some industry meme account or something around this topic we're talking about that just makes you laugh every time because it's really true?
I always laugh when, and I'm actually going to talk to Nelson from the death of the BDR, and he's got some interesting points that he makes. But I always see this really funny I always get this really funny picture of the skeleton, that's sitting there waiting for the call or whatever. That's like got the headset on. Because when I hear some of the times when I hear certain demand gen and I tend to think of myself as a really good demand gen marketer, right? But I see them talking about how everything has got to be so organic and like I just hear it nonstop, and I'm like, how the hell are you going to build a business without going to create a little bit of friction with your customers? Now, that's the other extreme, right? There's the ones who want to go on calls and fight the people. Like literally, they want to just beat people up, and you want to watch out for people like that, right? In life. So you want to get off the call and book a meeting so you can get them off the call as quickly as possible. But there's this other group that's like, let everything in the world come in organically and natural and like content. And I'm like, well, you're playing the social media algorithm, basically feed.
I call them passive marketers or passive demand gen. They just
Yeah,
sit there
I just don't know how they can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you what they do. They spend a lot of money on paid ads, which works, by the way, if you're good at it.
And a lot of visual production, I find as well. It's like, hey, look at this thing that I did. And I'm like, well, did it work?
Monday.com is very good at it. So take a look at what they're doing.
Love their videos, actually. They're really good. Okay, good answer. For me, if you ask me that question, have you seen Corporate Bro?
Love him too. Yeah, he's incredible. I watch all of his stuff. He's awesome.
We sort of talked about, if they want to get in contact with you, there's the community, obviously. But what do you do at Lead Magic, just really quickly?
Yeah, so it tells people who's on their website, businesses, and then we also have the data enrichment part of it as well. And for some of our customers, we are running campaigns. So if you think about our product, it's the lower cost product, which is the product you get on the website, and you see who's on your website. You just install a pixel and it'll tell you. And then we also have we're competitive, like Clearbit Reveal, those kind of more expensive. Some of those products are a little too expensive now, I think. So come on, we're more accurate and we're a lot less expensive.
Okay, yeah, so data enrichment, really important, just to if you get an email address, it's like gives them some more accuracy around maybe their social media handles and their title and job and that kind of thing. Yeah.
It can identify the anonymous traffic, the B2B traffic that's on their website. So we're really good at identifying. We get about 35 to 40% of the traffic.
Okay, and best way to contact you if they really like what we're talking about today?
Just go to the community, the community.leadmagic.io, and just drop me a note in there. I'm available. Or LinkedIn really works too.
And thanks for taking the time today. I know you got a really packed schedule, but yeah, really liking what you do there, and it's you can tell it's sort of world class. Thanks for your time, Jesse.
Awesome, thank you.